You know, talking out of your ass is so fun. It's so fun to sit and talk out of your ass in general.
Hey YouTube, that was the Angry Canuck, and he did a video response to Luke 12,000 that was so delusional that I couldn't help but respond to it. So first of all, let's have a little introduction to what the Angry Canuck's all about in his own words.
You know, being a realist is very hard. I mean, it's a very hard thing to be a realist, and there's certain steps to becoming a realist. And once you're a realist, you just never go back. Being a realist is difficult. Being a realist requires so much reading, so much research, so much evidence.
And in case you forgot,
being a realist is tough.
Very tough to be a realist. Very tough to be a realist. We should write this down. It's probably about as hard as it was for our parents to walk uphill in the snow both ways to school. It's probably that kind of hard, like just unimaginably hard. Okay, so he's got me here. He asked a really good question.
I think I read books.
Where would I get a crazy idea like that?
Being a realist is difficult. Being a realist requires so much reading, so much research, so much evidence.
Ah, yes. I was so focused on how hard it was to be a realist, I lost concentration and forgot about all that stuff you got to do, like the reading. Lots of reading. So, yeah, I guess maybe you would pick up some books and read them and maybe learn something.
I don't give a shit about what an author thinks. I don't read books.
Doesn't that seem a little strange? Pivotal, I mean, just fundamental to you becoming a realist is reading, and yet he doesn't read books. I mean, obviously we know there are other forms of media out there, but if reading was that fundamental, you would just think maybe pick up a couple books. I don't know. So, well, of course, this begs the question, well, where does he get his information, right? How? How does he get this? How does he get all this realistic information in that brain of his? I'm dying to know.
Stuff. I read information. I read facts. I read numbers.
This guy's a friggin' genius. All this time, humans, we've been, transmitting our ideas down through the millennia, filtered through our biases and our prejudices and our hopes and our dreams and our life experience. And this guy just cuts right through it. Just all he does is gets the information. It's just amazing. No opinions, no bias, no prejudice. He just gets all the information, and then his brain just does these calculations and he figures it all out. Isn't that amazing? Or is it just bullshit? Because we all know there's no such thing as an uninterpreted fact, folks. You may be looking at numbers, but those numbers require an interpretation, either by you or the person who got them, the person who compiled them, the population samples. There's a myriad of ways to manipulate numbers. So just processing numbers isn't going to tell you anything. And there's, like I said, there's no such thing as an uninterpreted fact. So all of our bullshit meters should be going off at this point. A guy who doesn't read and just supposedly, digests information. Yeah. Now I could stop here. We have a pseudo-intellectual who doesn't read books, which is really enough for me to tune out at this point. But he draws me in because he talks about Noam Chomsky in a very peculiar way.
This person named Noam Chomsky.
Now, get this. He's telling anarchists that there's this guy named Noam Chomsky. Now, Luke mentions Noam Chomsky on his channel. He's made videos about Noam Chomsky. Basically, any anarchist worth his salt knows who Noam Chomsky is. Yet this guy's like telling us about some, esoteric stuff that we don't know about. Check out how he goes on.
Early back on in the early 2000s, right? I mean, you can download his MP3s and watch some of his videos online. Before any of this stuff was popular. Noam
Chomsky's been in the public spotlight as one of the leading intellectuals of his generation for well over 40 years now. I think he's taught at MIT for something like 50. And yet, this realistic Canuck, or AngryCanuck, he knows about Chomsky way back in the early 2000s. It's like 8 years ago, maybe. Wow, this guy's like way ahead of the curve, right? But it gets better. It gets better.
Chomsky is not a realist. He's a realist / conspiracist.
Okay, so we know the Canuck doesn't read books. So what you're going to see going here in front of me are just the numerous titles, numerous books that have been published by Noam Chomsky, well over 50 probably, and but the Canuck doesn't read these, but he knows what Noam Chomsky is, and this is what's so funny about it, folks. If anybody who knows anything about Noam Chomsky should know that he's not a conspiracy theorist at all. In fact, one of the heaviest criticisms Michael Parenti has levied, and others have levied against Noam Chomsky, is he won't even look at the evidence for 9/11, for the assassination of JFK and other things. He won't even look at the evidence. And his whole approach, far from being a conspiracy theorist, is that we shouldn't look at conspiracies. We should look at the larger systems and institutions. That's his approach. So to say he's a conspiracy theorist is really not very realistic. And I know being realistic's hard, but you could do it. But you might have to read one of his books. I don't know. And in fact, if you wanted to read a book that is really of Noam Chomsky's that kind of give you the flavor for this, Revisiting Camelot analyzes the issue most prominently posed in Oliver Stone's film JFK. Was President Kennedy a secret dove whose assassination extinguished a chance to end the Vietnam War? That's what it's about. I mean, he is arguing against a conspiracy. Always has. Just dismisses it. Same with 9/11. So the reality, if we're going to be realistic, is Noam Chomsky is not a conspiracy theorist at all. He dismisses them out of hand. There's a ton of videos here on the YouTube you guys can probably find where he completely dismisses anything conspiratorial about 9/11. Just completely dismisses it. Not very realistic of you, Mr. Canuck. If completely misrepresenting one of the world's most renowned intellectuals, he goes on to speak about anarchy.
The fact is, anarchy is never proven to work. The closer
When I hear something like that, you know what I really hear is freedom doesn't work. You know, it's this notion that you and I aren't smart enough to make decisions for ourselves. We need someone else to make those decisions. And it's really the most anti-human sentiment I ever hear, I ever come across. It's just completely ridiculous. And we have real historic examples of anarchism working. Most of human history was based on anarchist principles. The hunter-gatherer societies that make up the bulk of human history were egalitarian, non-hierarchical, cooperative tribes. Okay, very much based on anarchist principle. That's how we got to where we are. Okay, and we have modern examples of the Paris Commune, the Spanish Revolution, the factory takeovers in Italy, and the numerous cooperatives and anarchist organizations we have right here in this country. You know, we have a long anarchist history in this country, and it's worked, and it continues to work, and it will work, because all it's based on is freedom. It's giving people power over their own lives. That's it. Very simple, and it does work.
Man, a year and a half ago, global warming was going to kill us all. It was the death and doom and destruction. Now you don't hear about global warming. It's the election in the U.S. You don't hear about any global warming issues because nobody buys it anymore. They're not.
The reality is that in its most recent statement, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change stated unequivocally that the consensus of scientific opinion is that the Earth's climate is being affected by human activities. That's reality.
I mean, it's a very hard thing to be a realist, and I'm misunderstanding it. I'm misunderstanding it. I'm misunderstanding it.